Welcome to the Building and Growing podcast. We're
we
delighted to have Kyle Dutka here from pb+j. How are you, Kyle?
Good. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's great, Lucas. I'm doing great. I'm better now that I'm here.
Yeah,
This is it. This is the highlight of my day.
Mate, I hope it's the most comfortable chair you sit in today. The lounges are just kind of dreamy, eh?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The train is pretty comfortable. Not as comfortable as this though. So
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, Kyle, welcome. Kyle is the co-founder of pb+j, which you're going to tell us all about.
Yeah.
We're going to be diving into sort of the world of agencies and e-commerce
Yeah.
today. But before we do that, why don't we kick off with an intro to yourself?
Well, I will try. That's a good intro. That's all you need to know. So it's great to be here. Like you said, I'm one of the co-founders of pb+j. We're an e-commerce agency named after a sandwich, which I've learned is not a thing here in the UK, but in North America, the pb+j, the classic.
Yeah, peanut butter and is it jelly or jam?
This is a hot debate.
Yeah.
Right? Is it jelly or jam? We are jam. We are all in on jam.
Far out. Yeah,
but I know some people say jelly, but jam. It's got to be jam.
They say jelly, so that I must admit, before today, I'd never heard of the jam sort of abbreviation of it, but yeah.
I feel like this is a whole nother podcast, but I feel like there's an actual differentiation between jam and jelly.
Yes, yeah.
I feel like the jam is a different texture to it, but I'm not a food person, a food connoisseur, so I should know. But
that's nuts.
Yeah.
I've never done a podcast on food, but if
Here
you
we
find
go.
someone
Let's
that
scrap
knows,
the plans. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
that's good.
That's sick. So crack on. I mean,
Yeah. So my co-founder Tom and I started about 10 years ago, and we've been doing agency for about a decade.
That's
together,
nuts.
and it's been great. He's incredible and a great co-founder to go on this journey. And along that journey, we actually spent a couple years as e-commerce founders as well. So we started an e-commerce brand for a couple years while we were running the agency. Did that.
Nice.
And a bunch of stuff along the way. So mainly agency, a few things in e-com as a founder, as an operator.
Yeah.
Done some teaching here and there, and had some kids along the way.
Yes.
Not with Tom, with my partner Britt. And now we're here. I'm living in the UK and enjoying the countryside while most of the team's still back in Canada.
Yeah, that's nuts. I mean, look, I've been running an agency for 1.5 years. I can't imagine, how long, 10 years in the game is. That's nuts.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. I think it's a weird spot because you hit that when you start talking about things. I've been doing it for a decade.
Yeah,
you're like, I feel like I should know a lot more. You know what I mean? Like, and then you appreciate how much you've learned, but then also you're just learning and growing.
Yes.
Here's the segue to the podcast. You're building and growing every day. Like, it's just a constant.
Indeed. Yeah. I mean, if you stop learning, someone else will take a bit of a competitive advantage and, will overtake you.
Absolutely.
But I mean, just in terms of e-commerce across that decade, I'm sure there have been so many changes. But did you always start it out to be focused on e-commerce, or was that a pivot? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's a good question. So about 10 years ago, we set out as an agency. Really, the genesis was like, help the good founders win. It was kind of this idea. We really focused on SMEs, the smaller businesses, and we worked with them on a whole bunch of stuff. So there was e-commerce was always a piece of it.
Yeah.
We were doing things like branding and digital marketing, and like we did some with trade show booths, like the whole thing, right? And over the past probably about 4 years, we've really taken that e-commerce piece and fine-tuned it and said, hey, we really want to tune our expertise and our focus on e-commerce founders. So it's always been part of it, but really the last about, say, 4 years, we've really focused in on e-commerce.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
It's been fun.
Yeah, indeed. And tell us about the e-commerce store that you guys ran.
Yeah. So we one day over lunch, as co-founders do, as you probably know, right? You get bored with your current idea and come up with new ideas.
Yes.
And so we said, at the time, this is about 6 years ago, the socks were kind of coming into the fold, like sock subscriptions and that kind of stuff. We're like, we're going to start a sock brand.
Fantastic.
And then we, as like, designers and creatives kind of as our background, we said, we're not just going to drop ship socks. We're going to like design our own socks, get them manufactured, have this like custom design, and we're going to, tailor it at like the young professional, and then do a sock of the month club.
Yeah.
And so we did that for about 2 years. It's called King in Portland. I ironically, actually, I didn't do this on purpose, but I wore the socks today.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
So here we go. But
nice.
We for about 2 years we did that. It was about 300 subscribers. Like when we were at the point where like this is no longer a side thing.
Yeah.
Either we got to scale it or we got to sell it. And what we ended up doing is there was another sock company that was interested in growing, and we said, hey, do you want this? We worked out an arrangement. So they bought it.
Nice.
And they've kept it going, but we've back focused on the agency.
Fantastic.
Yes, it was a fun ride. Learned so much. Yeah, it was really cool.
And what kind of problems did maybe, you guys face when you were running the agency? When you were running the e-commerce store. That then led you to pivot towards e-commerce for the agency?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if there was like a direct moment where we sat down and said, oh, this is the thing, now we get it. But I think there's a lot we brought into it.
Yeah.
When we were thinking about the agency and positioning and kind of fine tuning where we're going to focus our expertise, it was always like, what are we really good at? What do we love? Because that will fuel us keep going, and what we actually make money at.
Yes.
I always joke, like we love working with musicians because we love creatives, but the money dries up pretty quickly. And so like e-commerce was one of those areas that intersected with, we're good at it, we love it, and you can make money at it.
Yep.
And then we pulled a lot of those. I think there's a lot of that like founder empathy, not just as an agency, but you pull in, and I'll be like, remember that time when we were like stuffing socks at midnight, to get the order out? Like I can empathize with these founders that are, they've got their teams and stuff, but it's still like you're doing whatever you can to get your baby alive and well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, that's nuts. And so look, why don't you tell us a bit about the services that you guys offer at pb+j, and then we can sort of deep dive into, maybe who your ideal client is as a result of those services.
Yeah, cool. That's great. So ask a founder to talk about their business baby. How long do you have?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll give you the short version. So where we focus is we help e-commerce brands help them grow. And so generally what we do is we sit down and go like, what are your growth goals for the next 6-12 months?
Yeah.
And then design a roadmap that is a program around achieving those. So typically we're like, hey, let's move conversion rate, average order value, purchase frequency, lifetime value. Yeah. The big 4 metrics that ultimately usually roll up into revenue growth. And then our focus in the roadmaps typically is in one of 3 areas, depending what the need is. So we do a lot of, design builds in terms of Shopify websites, typically in Shopify.
Okay.
High performing websites, that's the mothership of e-commerce brands, especially ones that are D2C focused.
Yes.
So we might do a full, or we might do a retheme, a redesign. But we do design builds. We do optimization, typically CRO work, so conversion revenue optimization. So I get my acronyms right.
Yeah.
And work, monthly to go, how do we optimize through testing, through different hypotheses to go like, how do we increase conversion rate or average order value to drive revenue?
Yeah.
And then the third lane is in really retention. And so we moved into over the past years into like email, SMS, loyalty, to go purchase frequency and lifetime value, also big parts of the conversation. How do we play in that with our brands?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, I mean, that's like 3 clear sort of business lines. And all of them are so important.
So huge,
Yeah. So what would your typical client look like in terms of, revenue or user base or order value even?
Yeah, so I would say we're focused at mid-market founder-led brands that are very D2C e-commerce focused. So generally most of their revenue is coming through a direct-to-consumer channel. Yeah. And they're generally on Shopify. And the mid-market for us, and everybody's got different ways to quantify that, like 5 to 50 million GMV is where we focus. Now we work with brands that are like just in the 1 to 2 million, definitely as they've crossed over that threshold. I personally, like Tom and I are like super passionate about people that are just starting up. Yeah. But as you know, with agencies, there's a certain structure that agencies work is really great, like gasoline on a fire.
Yes.
Yeah. And so like when we work with founders that are maybe just, below 1 or 2 million, it's that the fire's got to get started, and the founders are the best to do that.
And it's hard to justify it from a cost point of view.
It's hard to justify it. And we can't return the value. And so it's not a fit, right?
Yeah.
So usually that 5 to 50 million GMV is the sweet spot. It's a big range, but it's kind of not startup, but also not enterprise.
Yeah. And how long does it normally take founders to get there? Because you hear about people who are saying, oh, look, I'm going to sell towels on the internet or soaps or whatever. But, actually, even the ones you've described as small, hitting 1 million GMV is massive.
It's huge.
How do people build these businesses up?
It's a good question. I think it can be different for every brand, of course. But like I've seen, somewhere you spend years trying to get to that 1 million mark and you finally crack it. And there's some that do it in like half a year.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, depending on your model, I know like if you're going and you're building a product and that's a big thing, you might spend a year just fine tuning what the product is and the fit, and really seeing if that fits. Or if you're going more, I know drop shipping's really shifted, but if you're working to sell maybe someone else's product and you're curating things, I've seen those scale a lot faster. And even like we work with patrons, we call our clients patrons.
Yes. Yeah.
We worked with patrons like even this year where it's like they were at like 5 million and they're already at 15 million. And we're like, you're trying to keep the strategy up with their growth.
Yeah.
That's more an anomaly, but it can happen.
Yeah. And so when it comes to, let's say, the Shopify websites, you mentioned that you do a lot of work on like redesigns or rebuilds. What are the primary reasons that people need to rebuild or redesign those sites?
Yeah, a great question. And I think a lot of times people come in and they go like, well, things aren't working. We need to redesign the site. So usually one of the first questions we ask is like, well, what's the real challenge? Like, what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
Because often we go, well, we got to redesign the website because conversion's wrong or AOV's off, or we just need to grow and we've got a chunk of money. We're going to go make a new website.
Yeah.
And often it's not the right thing to do. There's a ton of people that come in that want to do, a new website and we might say no to them because it's the better thing to do here is maybe invest it into optimization.
Yeah.
Or it might even be into ads, depending on what you're trying to solve.
Yes.
But when it is the right fit, it's kind of like two things that we see is like one is there's been a really moment of transformation in the brand. So that could be like they've done a full rebrand or a significant repositioning.
Yeah.
Where outside of the metrics, there's a business case to realign the mothership with the direction of the business.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other is like the metrics are in a place where it's worth the big bet. And I think this is where, like, especially now in the market versus say like the e-com gold rush of 2 years ago, brands have to be really, really careful is when you do a redesign, you can make a big bet to make big movement on your metrics.
Yes.
But a bet is a bet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and so it's not incremental. So you launch and it might be, you put all the strategy, everything into it and you go like, this could be great. It can be everything, but it could also tank stuff.
Yeah. Far out.
And so that's kind of like, if you're at a place where the metrics are in a spot where it makes sense to make a big bet, that can work. But otherwise, incremental improvement over time, that's really, and often a great strategy for brands.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think, incrementals are really important because something at the top of the funnel, even just adjusting that 5 or 10% can have a massive impact further downstream.
Totally.
But, conversion rate optimization is something you said that you really focus on as well. And so I'm wondering if we can talk about a funnel and start at the top.
I like it. Yeah, let's go into it. I love it. I love a good funnel chat.
We'll do it visually. I should learn how to animate on the screen.
Yeah, it's coming up. Here
That's it. So let's start at the top.
Yeah.
Where do you find your clients are sourcing most of their customers? And I'm really interested in your answer here because D2C is the most difficult and competitive market that there is. So how are they feeling at the top and how do you help them increase that top of funnel metric?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll caveat this saying, so we focus primarily conversion and retention and we'll partner with or refer out to acquisition focused agencies that are really experts at that top of funnel stuff.
Yeah.
So they'd probably have maybe, the real game plan, but what I see from our perspective, because what we do is really capture and partner and go like, now that they're here, how do we better convert them and drive lifetime value? But what, in terms of the acquisition, what we do see as high level trends is, as we all know, rising cost of acquisition is changing the game when it comes to social ads.
Yes.
And I think that's been a big shift into experimentation. I think a lot of brands are still figuring it out.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are starting to experiment with more like micro influencers, seeing that happen, trying new platforms, whether it's like a different search platform or, moving different social.
Yeah.
Also just like really trying new channels, like seeing like brands that are like, that might be D2C focused, going, well, what if we tried Amazon?
Yeah.
And they might have been out from that because of margins, but because cost of acquisition has gotten so high, they're trying new things.
Yeah, far out.
The biggest thing I'd say that a lot of, I think, successful brands are shifting to is community and own channels. Mm-hmm. So community building around the brand, and not just like, hey, we have an Instagram page or a TikTok that people follow.
Yeah.
But building meaningful community where people are connecting, getting value online, in person, whatever it is.
Nice.
And then nurturing that community through own channels. Yes. And those own channels go back to like email, SMS, things where you're not, we there's a place and time for social, and we need all that, but ultimately it's not your channel.
Yeah.
They change the game.
Yes.
So what is the stuff that you can own? Typically email, SMS, and other pieces.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's great. So look, I mean, like that's a really interesting piece that you mentioned.
Yeah.
About acquisition costs leading to people trying new, or businesses trying new channels.
Yeah.
And forgive me if this is too basic of a question.
That's okay.
Let's say let's say I've got a Shopify store.
Yeah.
Can I advertise that store on Amazon, or are we talking about building a new store on like multiple different platforms?
Yeah. Okay. It's a great question. It's not basic. It's a good question. How do I do this, right? The thing that we love about Shopify is the way that it's in the market as a leader. And so with Amazon, for example, there's a pretty tight integration where you can run your Amazon and Shopify together. Presence, and you can actually launch into Amazon as a channel through Shopify.
Wow.
So you use Shopify to be like the mothership, as it were, but you're selling through Amazon. And then Amazon really becomes that channel where it's a different set of strategies, how you write the copy and get those reviews plays a much different game than on your website, of course.
Yeah.
But you can centralize a good chunk of that management all through a platform. So you don't have to build like a separate thing, but your strategy of selling on Amazon versus selling on your own Shopify site is different.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So look, we've got the customers in.
Yeah.
They've come in, from a new channel. They might have come in from paid ads, from community, from own channels.
Yeah.
What happens next in terms of the conversion funnel? I guess people are looking around. Maybe they want to buy a shirt.
Yeah.
Talk us through that mid-conversion funnel, which is, I guess, your bread and butter.
Yeah. I like that too. It's our bread and butter. It's our bread and peanut butter.
That's it. PB and B.
PB,
J and B.
That's what it is. Yeah, and that's that's a lot of that happens on site. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of work, and this is like a great area that even brands on their own can experiment with, either lower touch tools or just getting in there on the tools that they have.
Yeah.
What is the data saying, and what could that mean in terms of like what should we experiment with to really? At the fundamentals, it's like reducing friction and increasing friction.
Yeah.
So it's reducing friction of the things that we want them to do. Yes. And increasing friction of the things we don't want them to do.
Yeah.
At a very basic level. And of course, it's a lot more technical. And then you run A/B tests and you hypothesize and you use AI now and all that stuff to go like, hey, if we do something as simple as, put free shipping on the PDP versus just on checkout, how does that increase the decrease drop off and increase conversion for people buying a product? So it could be something as simple as that, all the way to, full on redesigns of like a certain part of the funnel. But the big thing is always start from the cart and work backwards. So always go like, when we look at the data, it's like what's happening in the cart, where can we make impact on those, sub metrics, and then go backwards up. Yes. And that's what's going to drive your biggest impact.
That makes sense. And I guess when I've seen app-based businesses, they might use things like Mixpanel or Amplitude. What type of tools do you use to measure the user journey and identify those friction points or opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Opportunities is a good one. Yeah. So, of course, a lot of Google Analytics. That's a go-to. We use a lot of Hotjar for more of the subjective pieces, viewing the user journey. Then we're using Convert now. Google Optimize used to be the tool, but we've moved over to Convert now. That's sunset to do the testing.
Yes.
And that's where you do a lot of the A/B testing, understand the hypothesis. And there's some great tools though that are integrating a lot of this, like metric optimization and then also A/B testing. So we use a lot of Rebuy now.
Yes. Okay.
As a tool that's a jackknife tool for all things e-commerce, but they've recently launched A/B testing and things you can do right in the tool.
Fantastic.
So there's a lot of cool, interesting things coming out that, allow you to experiment, make impact, and move quickly.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
So, we've discussed, I guess, the building and design side of things. Some of the conversion as well.
Yeah.
One of the things you also mentioned was optimization. And I guess when I hear that word, I always think, all right, search engine optimization.
Yeah.
But what does optimization mean for e-commerce brands?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah, because it can mean so many things.
Yeah.
For us, I mean, optimization is really getting back to those 4 metrics: conversion rate, average order value, purchase frequency, and lifetime value. Mm-hmm. On site, it's typically conversion rate and average order value.
Yeah.
And it's how do you optimize those? And really, sometimes optimization looks like it does look like a speed optimization because speed's getting in the way of conversion.
Yeah.
But more often than not, optimization is, how do we take the data and leverage it to optimize and get from, a 2% conversion to 2.2, 2.5, and then keep going on whatever it is.
Yes. Yeah. And one thing that I found when I was at Revolut was that if we had clients or businesses that came from different sources, conversion rates were
all over,
higher on some and lower on others. And do you find the same with I guess the multi-channel approach at the top?
Yeah, it's a really important thing to look at, and the context of where that traffic's coming from. Yes. And then also like measuring that over time. So we see this all the time, and this is why we try to work in really close tandem with acquisition agencies or ads agencies, because you go and they launch a new experiment and a whole new set of traffic comes in, and it's like, great, we have 100,000 new people that just showed up, and conversion rate goes to like 0. And you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
Because they were experimenting with a new, target demographic. And that is interacting totally different. So I think segmenting your traffic sources and understanding what's happening there in the context is super important, because conversion rate, average order value, they're the end result, but they're impacted by all these things up funnel.
Yeah, indeed. I love funnels.
I love it. Yeah. Did you do a lot of like funnel analysis when you were at Revolt?
Yeah. We did quite a lot. I mean, it was always the website team focused on websites, but I guess in terms of when businesses started creating accounts, we did a lot of sort of channel analysis there. Yeah. And it was interesting. Some channels, had like a super high conversion rate relative to the others, and it was because there was a lot more intent. So, for example, if a company is newly formed, they need a bank account. Therefore, you would expect a conversion rate to be much higher from that type of channel compared to, a different one, like an affiliate maybe, it's quite interesting. But then, let's say the average basket value or lifetime value of a small business, fees are much lower compared to maybe a larger business that you could get through a different channel. So a high conversion
stacking
rate.
all those up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I love it.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I think that's the key though, is to bring that the synthesis of all those pieces together. It's so easy to get fixated on like one single metric. Yeah. And I think it's important to have clarity and focus.
Yes.
But also, like you said, hey, conversion might be great in this channel. Yeah. But if their lifetime value is, 10% of this other channel, that's worth considering.
That's it.
Right?
That's it. Yeah. No, it's super important. You got to get the right mix.
Yeah.
But
love it.
Well, Kyle, earlier on you touched upon the fact that a few years ago, it was kind of the golden age of e-commerce, of drop shippers. I mean, I thought about this question a lot. I think the question really to ask is what happened? What is e-commerce now? What was it before the pandemic?
Yeah.
Where do you see it going?
Yeah, I mean, if I have an answer here for where it's going, I mean, we should sell this podcast for millions of dollars. But I'll try to take a stab at it. I kind of, so there's like, I'll talk about like pre-pandemic, then during pandemic, and kind of where it's been the last couple of years.
Yeah, great.
I think pre-pandemic, there was this rise of e-commerce, and the drop shipping model that came out of that was really interesting.
Yes.
And that's definitely died off now in that the way it was, because what happened was like people will come and people were like moonlighting. I have like a good friend who was doing this as well, and just, work an agency in the day and like weekends. It was basically, could you fine tune the Facebook ads model to just build an amazing funnel? And then once you tuned it in, you just experiment every weekend on it and you get it dialed in. And once you did, then it was like, how many credit cards can you stack up on this Facebook ads account and just drive hundreds of thousands of dollars on ad spend?
Far out.
And because drop shipping was relatively new to the game.
Yeah.
And at the time, especially in North America anyways, there was, I think it's still happening, but there was like a shipping agreement between like China and the US that allowed, it was really slow shipping, but it was really cheap.
Okay.
And you could, part of this like combination of Facebook ads, once you could dial into the funnel. Yeah. And because it was relatively cheaper compared to how it is now. Yes. And there was a shipping arrangement, you could basically play the Facebook ads playbook. Yeah. And just drive like not unlimited, but you just scale with a credit card, literally.
That's nuts.
And you wouldn't have any operations basically behind it, because it would just drop ship, and all you'd have to do with customer service is answer emails and then ship them new one, because the margins were so big. It was just such like, cheap sunglasses or watches or whatever it was.
And then you just mark them up.
Just mark them up, 4 or 5 times the price or whatever, 10 times the price, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then that era, like two things really hit that, which was, rising ads costs. But the iOS shift in privacy really changed the game in tandem with that. Yeah. Where the changes around privacy and the tracking, as many of us have talked ad nauseum about, it just changed the game of what you could do with ads. So ads no longer became the tool that you could just scale on. Yes. So that was kind of like dying off, but at the same time, I'm missing my timelines perfectly here, but then you've got COVID hits and we're all sitting at home, and e-commerce takes this huge injection of like bored humans shopping online.
Shopping.
And it was crazy. Like I always see it as we saw like 10 years of growth in like 10 months. Yeah. Like it was just craziness. And then all the tech was investing, they were getting all this money and all this stuff, and people were like just running towards e-commerce. Yeah. And that was the first kind of like year of COVID. And then it started to go like, oh, is this going to sustain? And this is where you started to get like people like Shopify and all these companies like really betting big that it would just keep growing. Yeah. And it didn't. And it's really normalized back down. It hasn't, like if you look at the market, it hasn't gone under. Yes. But it hasn't maintained the growth. And so it was like this, like, oh, we're going to scale here. And it just kind of normalized, and you get all these tech layoffs to course correct and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The consolidation type phase.
It was just like, And so it's kind of like this, hyper growth down to like, okay, we're back to normal e-commerce, which is still a really growing, viable market. It's just not growing 10 years and 10 months.
Yeah.
And then in that shift, drop shipping shifted, and you've got this normalization, and so many brands that came out of COVID that just either were, people that were trying out their hand at it, or brands that got huge injections of cash from all the sales or from funding, because like funding was so hot in e-commerce. Yeah. Now it's just a little more of a hesitant period. I think where we're heading into is there's still a lot of opportunity, but it's a lot around what's the value that you deliver. And I think that whether it's because drop shipping can still work, but the game of just like selling whatever, like literally crappy product, but have a really good ads funnel, that era is over. Yeah. You still drop ship if you know what value you add. And if you're making a product, you still gotta know what value you add, because like it's not just a game of like, we're just going to buy everything, consumers are more conscious. Everything is like just a little more little more conservative.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the value you deliver? And I think that's the big thing 2024 is about. What's the unique value that you bring, understanding it and leaning into it.
Yes.
And really digging in, go like, if our value is, and I've seen this like on dropshipping brands, the value that they bring is it's good products, but it's amazing customer experience.
Okay.
They go over the top and that's their value.
Yeah.
Cool. Or if you're like a product, some great UK brands that I've been getting into here, a certain drink, it's like this iced coffee. I'm a big fan of Jimmy's iced coffee. Shout out Jimmy's iced coffee. But right, like I love the coffee, but like they connect, on like the sustainability level and like their purpose and the value they bring to me is not just great coffee, but aligns to my values.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyhow, there you go. That's a long way to say who knows, but it's been ups and down. And I would say value, like what's your value?
Yeah. That's a really good sort of summary of it. In terms of, we've moved away from price, let's say, more towards value.
Yes.
But one question in terms of, acquisition costs. So appreciate that Facebook ad acquisition costs, has increased significantly. One really key channel that we've seen emerge has been TikTok. And I've heard, I guess, from a few people, it seems like the jury's kind of divided between TikTok is still super cheap or TikTok is the same now in terms of ad cost as everybody else. And have you seen that?
That's a good question.
Yeah. How do you see TikTok?
Yeah, it's a good question, and because we don't deal in the ad space directly, I'm just more like as I'm connected and seeing. My opinion on TikTok, though, I think it's still viable to look at. I think brands need to. I think especially with just the way the pricing's changed in the metaverse. I mean, literally Facebook, Instagram, not the metaverse. Yeah, the meta universe. It's worthwhile to consider. Yeah, and I just think the gravitation towards TikTok. I know, like a lot of brands are. They're focused on it, but they're also conscious that like 2 years from now, it might not be the thing. So like understand it, get in the game, but understand like what's your long-term strategy as well. Because things like we saw with Facebook and iOS changes, like it can change literally in 6 months.
Oh yeah. And I mean, there's going to be this whole cookieless future, which
it's crazy.
Kind of deserves a podcast on itself.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Like need a data privacy lawyer or something to sit down and go through that. But I mean, that'll be interesting, and I hope it means we don't have to keep clicking accept or reject cookies every time you open a website.
Is this total sidebar? It's like. I think the intention was good, right? I want to own my data and privacy, but it's like literally, every website is just like, I don't even read it anymore. I just accept all. That's
it. Yeah. No, incredible. Well, that's great. So look, and I think, the other thing that happened with COVID was the fact that, shipping routes effectively were, like paused. I mean, during the pandemic, did you see with your clients or patrons, as you describe them as, having stock issues?
Yeah, some of them did. I think a lot depending on like where you were getting your product from, of course. So like drop shipping really took a hit there. Yeah. Or if you were getting manufacturing, like we had some patrons at the time that, I mean, it was COVID, and then at the time there was also like the trade war happening, like US, China. Yeah. And they were like, we've got to maybe like, I don't know, go to like a totally different country. They were manufacturing in China. They had like, relationships there. They were like living there part-time, and they're like, we might, because of like the tariffs that were being introduced, had to go like, well, we got to find another country. Yeah, it's literally a different country. Yeah. So anyhow, so it did. We all remember those scenes of like tankers lined up for days off of ports and stuff. Yeah. So it did hit, but there was obviously brands that were manufacturing in house, or they had a lot of stock. Not in house, sorry, in country, or they had a lot of stock, and they were able to work through that for sure. Yeah,
excellent. And the other thing that we haven't discussed in that space is, I guess, the democratization of like access to wholesale prices. We think about AliExpress, for example, which came in to I guess help SMEs access wholesale prices. Have you seen that impact the industry?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that value piece. I think as things, and it's, good that these things, like in terms of like we move things forward, but you're right, as things get democratized, it challenges maybe one model of the past where it's like, hey, the value here I deliver is like access to this product.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, when SMEs, but also like anybody can basically go on AliExpress and like, get their thing, right? And so I think like it does challenge back to like the brands, like what is the value you bring?
Yeah.
And if you're not, designing and building a product, and you're selling someone else's product,
yeah,
you got to think, it can't just be price. It's like, what is the thing here that I'm delivering?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, Kyle, I know I said like, I've only got like 7 questions for you. You've probably answered about 17 by now.
That's brilliant. So good.
But in terms of, the industry itself, I guess, is there anything else you want to expand on?
Oh, I mean, I think with e-commerce, one thing that we always talk about on our team is just that it's always changing. And I know business is always changing, but I just find e-commerce, if you're not tightly attuned to like a 6-month cycle of what was relevant and important 6 months ago might not be now or might be totally new. Yeah. Then you're going to miss important things. Yeah. And I think we need to be conscious of not just jumping on trends. I get that, and be mindful as a brand to not just like keep pivoting every 2 seconds. Yeah. But also, if you're not staying closely tuned with what's happening, you can miss out like on things that are just really important or major changes, whether it be technology, that allow you to do things more effectively or efficiently that you just don't need to do like you did before. So I think that's like a pretty macro trend, but it's this balance of not jumping on trends, but also realizing like it moves fast and you got to move with it.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And I mean, in terms of the e-commerce side, are there any other additional takeaways, I guess, or pieces of advice you'd give to all of us who are, considering, I can make passive income on the side.
Here we go.
With my e-commerce shop.
I think I still think there's a play in that, in the passive income. I do think it's like it's a harder, tougher game than it was, that pre-COVID era we talked about. You could dial in the Facebook funnel and sell your sunglasses for $2 million later. Here you go. So I think there's definitely like this. You need to really be able to dig into it and want to build something that can go towards something like community. In a brand or a story or something that's beyond just the product, because there's that value piece again. Like, what is the value you're selling? So I think if you go in with that mindset, and it's not just, you're not just looking to like make a quick buck on the weekend. You will go longer. I'm not saying that you can't. There's people out there who'll do it. But it's not that gold mine anymore, in my opinion.
And I think that's really important in terms of managing expectations. And when you come back to it, you keep talking again about value, and that's super important, and understanding what you want value to look like.
Yeah, exactly. That's well said.
No, mate, it's your words, not mine. So,
brilliant.
And
thank you,
Kyle. I guess at the end of the podcast, it's always great to dive into takeaways that you've got as a founder. But before we get there, I'm conscious it's been quite a few minutes now where we've been speaking about e-commerce trends. I wanted to loop back to pb+j just to see if there's anything else there that you want to discuss or mention.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No worries.
I mean, I think we're going through that right now where we go, what is the value, that we're delivering? And I think brands are feeling that push in the market, and consumers are saying, what's the value you bring to me? And by extension, then we feel the push to go back and brands, rightfully so, go, what's the value? What's the return on investment that we're getting here? And so we're going through that right now. I'm going like just retooling of going like, hey, what is it? People don't just have their big capital expense budgets that they used to. They need to get return on investment. So we've been experimenting with things like return on investment guarantees. Or performance-based marketing. Performance-based pricing. So we'll move these metrics. We'll take a percentage of it. So trying to connect the dots between we're delivering value, but we're not just delivering hours or scope. And then that's kind of rolling up into what we're really excited about in 2024. We're trying to move more to like an agency as a subscription model.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So we piloted this year with a few of our patrons. And it's this idea of, moving kind of the death of scope, the death of hours, and moving to like a flat, basically kind of like tier, like, 1, 2, or 3 key initiatives that are going on at a time towards your goals.
Yes.
And so it doesn't mean that, we're trying to like, do things profitably still, for sure. But at the end of it, what we're trying to do is say, what are your growth goals? What's the roadmap?
Yeah.
Let's stop fighting over scope and hours and just work together as a team to achieve those in this subscription kind of mindset.
Yes. Yeah.
So then that's like kind of what's on my mind is we wrestle with how do we continue to deliver value to our merchants, our patrons?
Indeed. Fantastic. Yeah. No, I love, agency as a service. And I think, full alignment is always super important and super useful. So that's great. Yeah. And Kyle, I guess, one question in terms of your customers. What's the sort of geographical split of your customer base and where are you looking to grow?
Yeah, we're mostly North America. So 80%, say 80 to 90% in a given year is Canada, US, and that's usually split between down the middle.
Nice.
So, and most of our teams in Canada, a few of us have dispersed. Yes. So there's that outlier, 10 to 20% in a typical year that's in Europe, UK.
Yeah.
I didn't come here to expand here, but now that I'm here and it's so lovely here, been speaking with some great merchants here and interested Fantastic. For sure in growing.
Yeah.
But there's so much opportunity in North America. I know, in the US is always that like just that huge market that everybody's trying to get into. So I know we'll keep growing there, and then we're kind of experimenting out in here in Europe and UK.
Perfect. Yeah. Excellent. Well, look, Kyle, you've told us a lot about pb+j today and, the e-commerce space. Do you have any key takeaways that you'd like to share with the audience, maybe about being a founder?
Oh, I love it. Other than listen to this podcast religiously, obviously the first takeaway.
Too kind.
Yeah, there you go. That's your first takeaway. Being a founder is it's such an honor and also a friggin' ride. Like it's it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I think 2 things that have stuck with me, if this is helpful to anybody, is the first thing is just being a founder, being an entrepreneur is like, it's a game of perseverance. And I think, on the tough days, when you're climbing up that proverbial mountain, it's just about like taking the next step.
Yes.
And how do I make up a little bit further, a little bit, and when I get, stumble a little bit and I fall down, getting back up. And I know it sounds super simple, but it's a game of perseverance. Yeah. Can you stay in the game longer? Can you get your mindset in a place that says, last week did not go as planned. Last quarter, we didn't hit our numbers, but I will get up and I will do it again. And I will learn from that.
Yes.
And I will grow from that, and kind of like adopting this, this obsession with this growth mindset of like, I'm always learning. I'm always growing. I'm always building and growing.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. And it's like, it's just always this journey and stay in the game. So that's like the first one that really sticks with me and it keeps me going on tough moments. Man, it's tough. It's tough some days.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I just taking that next step. It's so important.
It's
you
huge.
can't stop or go backwards. You just keep going forward, keep pushing a little bit more.
Well, and I think that's the other big one for me as a founder is in the spirit of that taking the next step is one of the most fundamental quotes that someone shared to me is probably a decade ago. Actually, maybe when we were starting was. I think it was a guy named F.M. Alexander, who's not really famous, but the quote was something like this was, people don't choose their destiny. They choose their habits, and their habits choose their destiny.
Yeah.
Have you heard that one?
That's a good one.
And it's always stuck with me because our habits, the taking the next step, is always in our control.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think we always, as founders, we have the vision, we have the dream, here's the destiny, and that's good.
Yes.
But the destiny is determined in like when you get up, what's the first thing? What's the first thing you do on your phone?
Yeah.
When you get into a situation where you're stressed or you're angry, what's your habit of response? Do you react to it or do you respond to it?
Yeah.
All these little habits and what's like reassuring for me, especially in those tough days, is like I can always go back to like, hey, maybe the destiny or the destination isn't what I wanted right now. But I can go back and go, what did I learn and what can I adjust to my habits? And if I just keep working on that, if I just keep taking the next step and tooling that, we'll get there. We'll eventually get to the destiny that we want.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic quote. And it really explains it all. And really good, about that situation that you described when you're stressed out and like habitually, how do you respond to stress?
Yeah.
You know, do you reach for, I don't know, a chocolate bar,
Yeah.
you know, or do you go for a walk? And actually over time, that can have a massive impact.
Do you find, you found that?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. But
love it.
Look, fantastic takeaways, Carl.
So good.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And
thank you for having me.
We look forward to, you know, watching PB+J's progress and sort of how the e-commerce market evolves.
Love it. Thank you for having me. A pleasure to be here.
You're most welcome. Thanks, Carl. Cheers.
Cheers.